Colonel James Richardson stood by the window of his office, watching rain tap against the glass. The weather matched his mood, somber and heavy. His phone buzzed on the desk, breaking the rhythm of raindrops. He turned from the window with a sigh. 20 years in the Army had taught him that calls at 5:30 a.m. rarely brought good news. "Colonel Richardson," he answered, his voice steady despite the early hour. "Sir, this is Captain Myers from Dover. We need you for a dignified transfer." Richardson closed his eyes briefly. In military language, a dignified transfer meant bringing a fallen soldier home. It was one of the hardest duties an officer could perform, but also one of the most important. "Who is it?" Richardson asked, already reaching for a pen. "Specialist Damon Williams, sir. 10th Mountain Division. IED in eastern Afghanistan 2 days ago." Richardson wrote the name down carefully. Every detail mattered when you were responsible for someone's final journey home. "His family is from Pine Creek, about 3 hours from your station. Command thought you'd be the right officer to escort him home." Richardson understood the unspoken message. As one of the few black colonels in his division, he was often assigned to escort duties when the fallen soldier was also black. The military believed families found comfort in seeing someone who looked like their loved one handling the solemn task. Richardson never minded. If his presence provided even a small measure of comfort to a grieving family, he considered it an honor. "I'll be at Dover by 1400 hours, Richardson said. After hanging up, he stood motionless for a moment. Each escort duty weighed heavily on him, but he never turned one down. Richardson had lost friends in combat. He knew the pain of those left behind. He understood the importance of bringing someone home with dignity. He opened his closet and carefully removed his dress blues, checking each medal and ribbon to ensure everything was perfectly placed. Richardson took pride in his appearance, especially for occasions like this. His father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught him that a sharp uniform was a sign of respect. "When you represent the Army, you stand tall," his father had told him years ago. "Some folks will only see the uniform, some will only see your skin. Make sure both are beyond reproach." As Richardson drove to Dover Air Force Base, he thought about Specialist Williams. According to the file he'd been sent, Williams was only 22 years old, with parents, a younger sister, and a fiancée waiting for him to come home. Now Richardson would bring him home, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Dover Air Force Base handled all military casualties returning from overseas. The procedure was carried out with precise dignity. Richardson reported to the Mortuary Affairs Office, where he received a detailed briefing about Williams and his family. "The parents have requested a full military funeral," the sergeant explained. "They're meeting you at Pine Creek Regional Airport tomorrow at 1500 hours. The funeral home will be waiting to receive the remains." Richardson nodded, memorizing the details. "Any special requests from the family?" "Yes, sir. Mrs. Williams asked if you could carry her son's dog tags separately. She wants to receive them personally." "Of course," Richardson said quietly. The Air Force staff led Richardson to a private room where Specialist Williams's personal effects were laid out. A wallet, a worn paperback book, a silver watch, a small photo album, letters from home, some still in their envelopes. Richardson carefully checked each item against the inventory list, then placed them in a special pouch he would keep with him throughout the journey. Next came the hardest part, the transfer itself. Richardson stood at attention on the tarmac as the cargo plane landed. 6 members of the honor guard approached the aircraft as its cargo door opened. Inside was a single transfer case draped with an American flag. Richardson saluted as the honor guard carefully removed the transfer case from the plane. Though he had performed this duty 12 times before, the weight of the moment never diminished. A young man who had left American soil full of life was returning home in a flag-draped case, his future erased, his family's lives forever changed. The honor guard carried Williams to the waiting vehicle with slow, measured steps. Richardson followed, maintaining his military bearing despite the tightness in his throat. They moved to the mortuary, where final preparations would be made before tomorrow's flight. After completing the necessary paperwork, Richardson was shown to temporary quarters on base. He called his wife, keeping his voice low as he explained his assignment. "Another one?" she asked softly. "Yes, young specialist. Family's waiting for him." His wife was silent for a moment. She understood this part of his duty all too well. "Do you want me to call Pastor Green? Ask him to pray for the family?" "Please," Richardson said. "And for me too." These never get easier. That's because you care, James. That's why they keep asking you to do them. After hanging up, Richardson sat on the edge of the bed and opened his laptop. He had made it a personal tradition to learn something about each soldier he escorted. Not just the details in the official file, but who they really were. He found Williams's social media pages. Pictures showed a young man with a bright smile, arm around a pretty young woman, presumably his fiancée. Another photo showed him in fatigues laughing with fellow soldiers. There was one of him in a graduation cap, his parents beaming beside him. Richardson studied the faces of Williams's parents, knowing he would meet them tomorrow under the worst circumstances imaginable. Richardson also found a local newspaper article about Williams joining the Army. The young man had spoken about wanting to serve his country and eventually use his GI Bill to become a teacher. I want to come back and make a difference in my community, Williams had said. Now he would return, but those dreams would remain unfulfilled. In the morning, Richardson dressed with careful precision. He inspected his uniform in the mirror, adjusting his tie, ensuring every medal and ribbon was perfectly aligned. He ran his hand over his close-cropped hair, noting the touches of gray at his temples. At 45, Richardson had seen too many young soldiers make this final journey home. At the mortuary, he supervised as Specialist Williams's transfer case was prepared for transport. The flag was meticulously draped, each fold precise. Nothing less than perfection was acceptable. An hour before departure, Richardson received a call from the airline confirming his priority boarding status. As military escort, he would board first to ensure the dignified transfer of the fallen soldier. We understand the nature of your travel, Colonel, the airline representative said. We'll have everything ready for your arrival. Richardson thanked her and hung up. He had made dozens of these trips and knew the procedure well. Airlines typically showed great respect for fallen service members and their escorts. An Air Force van transported Richardson and Williams to the commercial airport where they would catch their connecting flight to Pine Creek. At the cargo area, trained personnel transferred Williams' case to the commercial aircraft with proper ceremony. Richardson watched every moment, ensuring nothing disturbed the dignity of the process. With that complete, Richardson proceeded to the passenger terminal for his own boarding. He carried his small suitcase and the pouch containing Williams' personal effects. The terminal was crowded with summer travelers, families heading on vacation, business people hurrying between meetings, college students returning home. As he walked through the terminal in his dress blues, Richardson noticed the usual reactions. Some people stopped and stared. Others nodded respectfully. A few veterans offered salutes, which he returned. An elderly man approached him near the security checkpoint. "Thank you for your service, Colonel," the man said, extending his hand. Richardson shook it firmly. "Thank you, sir. My son served in the First Gulf War," the man continued. "Always good to see our military treated with respect." Richardson nodded politely, though his mind was on the task ahead. He proceeded through security, where TSA agents expedited his screening out of respect for his uniform and mission. At the gate, Richardson approached the counter and presented his boarding pass and military orders. "I'm escorting a fallen soldier," he explained to the gate agent. "His remains are being loaded in cargo now. I need to confirm everything is proceeding according to protocol." The agent, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, nodded sympathetically. "Of course, Colonel. Let me check with our ground crew." She made a quick call, then looked up. "Everything is proceeding as planned. We've notified the captain and he'll make an announcement after we're airborne to inform passengers of the honored passenger on board." "Thank you," Richardson said. "I appreciate your attention to this matter." "If you don't mind me asking," the agent said quietly, "who are you escorting?" "Specialist Damon Williams," Richardson replied. 10th Mountain Division. He was only 22. The agent's eyes softened. "I'm so sorry. Please extend our condolences to his family." "I will," Richardson promised. As he waited for boarding to begin, Richardson mentally prepared himself for meeting Williams's family. In his experience, these moments unfolded in one of two ways. Some families were overwhelmed with grief, barely able to speak. Others needed to talk, to hear about their loved one's final journey home, to know that they had been treated with honor every step of the way. Richardson would be ready for either scenario. He would stand straight, speak clearly, and offer whatever comfort his presence could provide. He would hand over the personal effects with care and explain each item if the family wished. He would answer their questions honestly but gently. Most importantly, he would ensure that Specialist Damon Williams was treated with the utmost respect and dignity from Dover to Pine Creek. It was Richardson's solemn promise to every fallen soldier in his care. And he never broke that promise. As the boarding announcement came over the loudspeaker, Richardson gathered his things and prepared to board. Tomorrow would bring one of the hardest parts of his duty, but tonight, his focus was simple: get Williams home. What Richardson didn't know as he stepped toward the boarding gate was that this particular escort duty would become unlike any he had performed before. The events waiting to unfold would test his patience, challenge his dignity, and ultimately shine a light on problems that extended far beyond one fallen soldier's journey home. The boarding process began smoothly. Colonel Richardson stood patiently in the priority boarding line, his posture perfect, his face composed. The gate agent called for active military personnel to board first, and Richardson stepped forward, presenting his boarding pass and ID. The gate agent, a thin man with thinning hair and a permanent frown, glanced at Richardson's documents. Something in his expression changed, a subtle tightening around his eyes, a slight downward turn of his mouth. "There seems to be an issue with your boarding," he said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby passengers to hear. Richardson kept his voice low and steady. "I'm on escort duty for a fallen soldier. His remains are already being loaded onto this aircraft. I need to board immediately." The agent tapped at his computer with increasing intensity. "I'm not seeing the proper authorization codes here." Richardson produced his military orders. "These were confirmed this morning. I spoke with your airline representative before leaving Dover." The agent barely glanced at the papers. "These don't match what's in our system." By now, other passengers were watching the exchange. An older couple exchanged concerned glances. A businessman in line behind Richardson checked his watch impatiently. "Perhaps you could call your supervisor," Richardson suggested calmly. "Time is of the essence. Specialist Williams's family is waiting." The agent's mouth twitched. "Please step aside while other passengers board. I'll need to sort this out." Richardson felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced countless times in his life and career when he was being treated differently than his white counterparts. But years of military discipline kept his expression neutral. This wasn't about him. It was about Specialist Williams. "I understand there may be confusion," Richardson said, "but I cannot step aside. I'm responsible for escorting a fallen soldier. His remains are on this aircraft and I must accompany him." A woman in line spoke up. "Let him board. He's escorting one of our fallen soldiers." The agent shot her an irritated look before picking up his phone. "I need a supervisor at gate 23, he said, then hung up without waiting for a response. Richardson remained perfectly still, his face betraying nothing of the frustration building inside him. Other military personnel, 2 white Army lieutenants and a white Navy officer, had boarded without issue moments before. Now he stood here, a full colonel with proper documentation, facing inexplicable irregularities. A supervisor arrived 5 minutes later, 5 precious minutes of boarding time lost. She was a middle-aged woman with streaked blonde hair and a name tag reading Ms. Lawson. The gate agent spoke to her in hushed tones, occasionally glancing at Richardson. Ms. Lawson approached with a practiced customer service smile. "Colonel, I understand there's some confusion about your boarding status." "There shouldn't be," Richardson replied evenly. "I confirmed everything this morning. I'm escorting the remains of Specialist Damon Williams, who is being loaded onto this aircraft as we speak. Time is critical." She nodded sympathetically, but her eyes remained cool. "I completely understand, sir. However, we have protocols for military escorts, and it appears the proper documentation wasn't filed." "I have my orders right here," Richardson said, offering the papers again. "And your airline confirmed my status this morning." Ms. Lawson barely glanced at the documents. "These aren't the internal airline authorizations we require. We need specific codes entered into our system." By now, general boarding had begun. Passengers streamed past Richardson, many casting curious or sympathetic glances his way. One man in a business suit stopped briefly. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking between Richardson and the airline staff. "Just a procedural issue," Ms. Lawson said quickly. Nothing to concern yourself with, sir. Please continue boarding. The man hesitated, looking at Richardson's uniform with its rows of ribbons and medals. You're escorting a fallen soldier? Richardson gave a single, dignified nod. That's what I thought, the man said. He pulled out his phone and began recording. I'd like to understand why a decorated military officer is being prevented from boarding while escorting a fallen hero. Ms. Lawson's smile vanished. Sir, recording is not permitted in the terminal. Actually, the man replied, the Supreme Court ruled that recording in public spaces is protected under the First Amendment. Now, why is the colonel being denied boarding? Other passengers had stopped to watch. The gate agent's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Ms. Lawson tried to regain control of the situation. We're simply ensuring all protocols are followed correctly, she said, her voice tight. It looks like discrimination to me, an elderly woman remarked loudly from her wheelchair nearby. Richardson maintained his composure, though inwardly he appreciated the support. Still, this was becoming a spectacle, and that was the last thing he wanted while performing this solemn duty. Ms. Lawson, he said quietly, I've performed escort duty 17 times. I've flown your airline 12 of those times. The documentation I have has always been sufficient. Specialist Williams deserves to reach his family without delay. Please, let's resolve this. The businessman was still recording. Several other passengers had their phones out now, too. Ms. Lawson glanced around, suddenly aware of the growing audience. Let me check something else, she said, stepping back to the counter with the gate agent. They huddled over the computer, speaking in urgent whispers. A young woman approached Richardson. My brother served in Afghanistan, she said softly. Thank you for what you're doing, Richardson nodded. Thank you for your brother's service. The final boarding call came over the loudspeaker. Nearly all passengers had boarded now. Richardson checked his watch. If he missed this flight, Specialist Williams' remains would arrive without escort. The family would be waiting with no one to properly transfer their son's body. The thought was unacceptable. Ms. Lawson returned with another man in a suit, clearly a higher-level manager based on his demeanor. Colonel Richardson, the man said. I'm Thomas Burke, station manager. I understand there's been some confusion. There's no confusion on my end, Richardson replied. I have orders to escort Specialist Williams' remains to his family. His body's on this aircraft. I need to board immediately. Burke nodded. I've reviewed your documentation, and there does seem to have been an error on our part. However, the aircraft door has now been closed. FAA regulations prevent us from reopening it. Richardson felt like he'd been struck. You're telling me the aircraft with Specialist Williams' remains is departing without escort? I'm afraid so, Burke admitted. But we can get you on the next flight, which leaves in 3 hours. The businessman, still recording, spoke up. So you're sending a fallen soldier's body to his family with no escort, because your staff couldn't recognize proper military documentation? Is that what I'm hearing? Burke's professional veneer cracked slightly. Sir, this is a private matter. It's not private, the businessman interrupted. It's a matter of national respect. This officer is performing one of the most sacred duties in our military, and your staff just prevented him from completing that duty. Richardson felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. In 20 years of military service, through combat deployments and countless difficult assignments, he had never failed a mission. Until now. I need to make some calls, Richardson said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. I need to inform Specialist Williams's family that there's been a delay, and I need to contact my command. Burke looked relieved at the chance to end the public confrontation. We'll provide you with a quiet space to make those calls, Colonel. And again, we'll get you on the next available flight. As Richardson followed Burke away from the gate, he heard the businessman behind him. I'm posting this video right now. The public needs to see how our military heroes are being treated. In a small office away from the terminal, Richardson made the hardest phone call of his career. He explained to his commanding officer what had happened, keeping his report factual and unemotional despite the anger and shame burning inside him. Next came the even harder call, to the funeral director in Pine Creek, who was coordinating with the Williams family. Mr. Harrington, this is Colonel Richardson, he began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. I'm calling to inform you that there's been a situation. I won't be arriving with Specialist Williams as planned. The silence on the other end was deafening before the funeral director spoke. The family is already here, Colonel. Mrs. Williams hasn't stopped crying since they arrived. Mr. Williams keeps watching the door. What am I supposed to tell them? Richardson closed his eyes briefly. Tell them I will be there as soon as humanly possible. Tell them their son is still being treated with the utmost respect and dignity. And tell them, his voice finally cracked slightly, tell them I am deeply sorry. After hanging up, Richardson sat alone in the sterile airport office, the weight of failure pressing down on his shoulders. In his 20 years of service, he had faced enemy fire, lost friends in combat, made life or death decisions under pressure, but nothing had prepared him for this. Being prevented from fulfilling his sacred duty not by enemy action or act of God, but by what appeared to be nothing more than prejudice disguised as procedure. As Richardson sat there gathering his thoughts, he didn't know that outside. The video of the incident was already spreading across social media. He didn't know that thousands of people were sharing their outrage. He didn't know that reporters were already calling the airline's corporate headquarters for comment. All Richardson knew was that somewhere in the sky, Specialist Damon Williams was flying home alone. And for a soldier whose job was to leave no one behind, that knowledge was almost unbearable. Colonel Richardson sat in the airport's small office, his normally impeccable posture slightly slumped. He'd just finished a call with his commanding officer, General Hayes, who had been both supportive and furious about the situation. "This is unacceptable, Richardson," the general had said. "I'm contacting the airline's executive office directly. In the meantime, do not leave that airport until we resolve this." Richardson stared at his phone, feeling the weight of failure despite knowing he'd done everything right. His thoughts kept returning to the Williams family, waiting at a small regional airport for their son's remains, now learning that the military escort wouldn't be arriving with him. The mental image of their disappointment and added grief was almost unbearable. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Thomas Burke, the station manager, entered with a tight, uncomfortable expression. "Colonel Richardson, I need to speak with you," he said, closing the door behind him. "There's been a development." Richardson straightened in his chair. "What kind of development?" Burke set his tablet on the desk, turning it to face Richardson. On the screen was a social media page where a video was playing silently. Richardson recognized himself standing at the gate while the agent and supervisor refused his boarding. "The video has gone viral," Burke explained, his voice strained. "It's been shared over 20,000 times in the last hour. 'Let Colonel Richardson Fly' is trending nationally." Richardson felt no satisfaction from this news. "Mr. Burke, my concern isn't social media. My concern is Specialist Williams and his family." "I understand," Burke said, though his worried expression suggested his primary concern was the public relations disaster unfolding. "Our corporate office is reaching out to the military liaison office. He hesitated. "They're arranging a private charter to get you to Pine Creek as soon as possible." Richardson's eyebrows rose slightly. "A private charter?" "Yes, sir. The company jet is being prepared now. It should be ready within the hour." Burke couldn't quite meet Richardson's eyes. "We deeply regret the misunderstanding." Richardson knew this sudden change of heart had nothing to do with genuine regret, and everything to do with the viral video and public backlash. Still, if it meant he could fulfill his duty to Specialist Williams and his family, he would accept it. "Thank you," he said simply. "Please let me know when the aircraft is ready." Burke nodded and left quickly, clearly relieved the conversation hadn't been more difficult. Alone again, Richardson finally allowed himself to look at his phone. Messages were pouring in from fellow officers, friends, and even strangers who had somehow obtained his contact information. His wife had texted multiple times, "James, you're all over the news. Are you okay? Call me when you can." He called her immediately. "I'm fine," he assured her, "just focused on completing the mission." His wife's voice was tight with concern and anger. "The way they treated you? It's disgraceful. General Hayes's wife called me. She said he's moving heaven and earth to fix this. They're arranging a private charter now," Richardson told her. "I should reach Pine Creek only a few hours behind schedule." "That's not the point, James," she said. "This shouldn't have happened in the first place. People are furious." "The video? It shows everything so clearly," Richardson sighed. "I didn't want any of this attention. This should be about Specialist Williams, not me." "I know, honey," his wife said softly, "but maybe this needed to happen. Maybe people needed to see this." Before Richardson could respond, there was another knock at the door. A young airline employee stood there looking nervous. "Colonel Richardson? The charter is ready, sir. They're waiting for you at the executive terminal." "I need to go," Richardson told his wife. "I'll call you when I reach Pine Creek." "Go do what you do best," she said. "That family needs you now more than ever." The private jet was a stark contrast to the commercial flight Richardson had been scheduled to take. Plush leather seats, polished wood accents, and only 3 other occupants. 2 pilots and a visibly anxious public relations executive from the airline's corporate office. "Colonel Richardson, I'm Vivian Taylor, Vice President of Customer Relations," she said, extending her hand as he boarded. "On behalf of the entire company, I want to express our deepest apologies for the inexcusable treatment you received today." Richardson shook her hand briefly. "Thank you, Ms. Taylor. My main concern now is reaching Specialist Williams' family as quickly as possible." "Of course," she nodded, gesturing to a seat. "We'll have you in Pine Creek in under 2 hours. Can I get you anything for the flight?" "No, thank you," Richardson replied, settling into a seat and placing Williams's personal effects carefully beside him. As the jet took off, Taylor attempted several times to engage Richardson in conversation, clearly hoping to smooth things over. Richardson remained polite but reserved, using the time to prepare himself mentally for meeting the Williams family under these difficult circumstances. Halfway through the flight, Richardson's phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Colonel Richardson speaking," he answered. "Colonel, this is Ron Harper from the Pine Creek Observer," came a man's voice. "I'm at the airport with the Williams family. Would you care to comment on what happened today?" Richardson's jaw tightened. "Mr. Harper, I'm currently en route to Pine Creek. My focus is solely on fulfilling my duties to Specialist Williams and his family with the dignity and respect they deserve. That's all I have to say at this time." He ended the call, aware that Vivian Taylor was watching him with increasing concern. "The press is already waiting in Pine Creek," Richardson informed her. "Just so you're aware." Taylor's professional smile faltered. "Colonel, our CEO would like to speak with you before you land. Would you be willing to take his call?" Richardson considered for a moment, then nodded. Briefly, 5 minutes later, Richardson was speaking with Jeffrey Phillips, the airline's CEO, who had apparently cut short a vacation to deal with the crisis. "Colonel Richardson, this should never have happened," Phillips said, his voice grave. "I've reviewed the security footage from the gate area. There was no legitimate reason to deny you boarding. We're conducting a full investigation, and those responsible will be held accountable." "Mr. Phillips, I appreciate that," Richardson replied. "But right now my only concern is Specialist Williams and his family." "Of course," Phillips said. "But I want you to know that we're implementing immediate changes to our military escort protocols, and we'd like to make a donation to a veterans organization of your choosing, if you're comfortable with that." Richardson recognized damage control when he heard it, but a donation to help veterans was something positive that could come from this situation. "The Fallen Heroes Fund would be appropriate," he suggested. "Consider it done," Phillips said quickly. "Is there anything else we can do for you, Colonel?" Richardson thought for a moment. "Yes. When we land, I'd appreciate it if Ms. Taylor would remain on the plane. The Williams family deserves to have this moment without corporate representatives present." There was a brief silence before Phillips responded. "Of course. I understand completely." As Richardson ended the call, he noticed Taylor's tight expression. She had clearly heard his request and wasn't pleased, but she nodded in acknowledgement. "I'll remain with the aircraft in Pine Creek," she confirmed. As the private jet began its descent into Pine Creek Regional Airport, Richardson gazed out the window at the small town below. Somewhere down there, a family was grieving, waiting for their son to come home one last time. Richardson checked his uniform again, ensuring every detail was perfect. He picked up the pouch containing Williams's personal effects, holding it carefully in his hands. Despite everything that had happened, despite the viral video and media attention, this moment wasn't about him or the airline's failings. It was about Specialist Damon Williams and the family who had lost him. The small airport came into view. Richardson could see several news vans in the parking lot, their satellite dishes extended. He sighed, wishing they weren't there, wishing this handover could happen in private as it was supposed to. "We'll be landing in 5 minutes," "Colonel," the pilot announced over the intercom. Richardson nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. The controversy would continue to unfold in the media. The airline would face consequences. The gate agent and supervisor would likely lose their jobs, but none of that mattered right now. As the wheels touched down on the runway, Richardson straightened his shoulders and lifted his chin. His mission, delayed but not defeated, was finally reaching its conclusion. In moments, he would face the Williams family and complete his solemn duty. The aircraft taxied to a stop near a small hangar where a group of people waited on the tarmac. Richardson could see the honor guard standing at attention, their uniforms crisp in the afternoon sun. Behind them stood an older couple, the Williams parents, he presumed, flanked by military personnel and what appeared to be family members. As the aircraft door opened and the stairs were positioned, Richardson stood and turned to Vivian Taylor. "Thank you for the transportation, Ms. Taylor," he said formally. "I'll take it from here." She nodded, remaining seated as promised. "Again, Colonel, our deepest apologies." Richardson merely nodded before turning to descend the stairs. As his boots touched the tarmac, he drew himself to his full height, squared his shoulders, and began the solemn walk toward the waiting family. A hush fell over the gathered crowd. The honor guard snapped to attention, rendering a salute which Richardson returned crisply. Then he approached Mr. and Mrs. Williams, who stood holding each other, their faces etched with grief. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams," Richardson said, his voice carrying clearly in the silence. "I'm Colonel James Richardson. I've accompanied your son, Specialist Damon Williams, on his journey home. On behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation, I extend our deepest condolences on your loss." Mrs. Williams broke down, sobbing against her husband's shoulder. Mr. Williams, his own eyes filled with tears, extended his hand to Richardson. "Thank you for bringing our boy home, Colonel," he said, his voice breaking. "We saw what happened on the news. We know what you went through to get here." Richardson clasped the man's hand firmly. "Sir, it was my honor and duty to escort your son. I only regret the delay in my arrival." "You're here now," Mrs. Williams said, looking up through her tears. "That's what matters." As Richardson began the formal process of transferring Specialist Williams's remains to the waiting hearse, he was acutely aware of the cameras recording every moment, of the reporters standing at a respectful distance. This very private moment of grief had become unexpectedly public. But as he handed Williams's personal effects to his mother, watching her clutch her son's dog tags to her heart, Richardson knew that some good would come from this painful situation. The public outrage would force changes, not just at one airline but perhaps throughout the system. The next military escort might not face the same discrimination. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough to balance the loss of a young soldier or the indignity of what had happened. But it was something. And in that moment, as Richardson stood at attention while Specialist Williams's flag-draped casket was loaded into the hearse, it had to be enough. 3 days after bringing Specialist Williams home, Colonel Richardson stood at attention in Pine Creek Cemetery as the honor guard performed the ceremonial folding of the flag. The crisp autumn air carried the solemn notes of taps across the gathered mourners. Richardson's face remained composed, though his heart ached for the family seated before the casket. The funeral had drawn hundreds from the small town. Friends, neighbors, former classmates, and even strangers moved by the story that had exploded across national news. Richardson had done his best to shield the Williams family from the media circus, working with local police to keep reporters at a respectful distance. As the honor guard completed the triangle fold, Richardson stepped forward to receive the flag. He approached Mrs. Williams kneeling before her chair. "On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service," he said, his voice steady and clear despite the emotion behind the words. Mrs. Williams reached out with trembling hands to accept the flag, clutching it to her chest as fresh tears flowed down her cheeks. "Thank you for bringing him home," she whispered. Richardson nodded once, rose to his feet, and stepped back, resuming his position of attention. The minister spoke the final prayers, and then it was over. Specialist Damon Williams was laid to rest in his hometown soil. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Richardson remained, waiting until the Williams family had said their private goodbyes. Only when they turned to leave did he approach them again. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, if you have a moment, he said. I wanted to speak with you privately before I return to base. They nodded, and Mr. Williams gestured toward a bench beneath a nearby oak tree. As they sat, Richardson noticed the exhaustion etched into their faces. The grief was raw, but there was something else there too, a quiet dignity that reminded him of their son. I wanted you to know, Richardson began, that what happened at the airport, it doesn't reflect on the military's commitment to honoring your son. I've received word that there will be a formal investigation into the incident. Mr. Williams shook his head slowly. Colonel, we don't blame you or the Army, not one bit. What those airline people did to you, that was wrong. Plain wrong. Mrs. Williams touched Richardson's arm gently. We saw the video. Everyone saw it. The way you handled yourself. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Damon would have been proud to have you as his escort. He always stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. Richardson swallowed the unexpected lump in his throat. Your son served with honor. His commanding officer spoke very highly of him. The airline's been calling us, Mr. Williams said, his voice taking on an edge, offering things. Money for a memorial, scholarships in Damon's name, free flights for the family. He shook his head. Feels like blood money to me. Richardson chose his next words carefully. Sir, I can't tell you what to do about their offers, but I believe your son's legacy deserves to be honored. Perhaps those resources could help others in his name. Mrs. Williams nodded slowly. That's what Damon would want. He was always thinking about others. She wiped away a tear. His fiancée told us he was planning to become a teacher after his service. He wanted to work with kids who needed extra help. A spark of an idea formed in Richardson's mind, but before he could speak, his phone buzzed with a message. He checked it quickly. I apologize, but I need to take this call, he said, standing. It's my commanding officer. The Williams nodded understandingly as Richardson stepped away to answer. Colonel Richardson, he said crisply. James, came General Hayes' voice. How did the service go? With full honors, sir. Specialist Williams has been laid to rest. Good. The general paused. I'm calling because you need to be prepared. The story isn't dying down. If anything, it's growing. The airline has placed those 2 employees on administrative leave pending investigation, but that's just fueled more outrage. Richardson sighed. Sir, with respect, my concern is for the Williams family, not media attention. I understand that, Hayes replied, but this is bigger than one incident now. The Pentagon is receiving inquiries from Congress. There's talk of hearings about treatment of military personnel, especially minorities in uniform. You may be called to testify. Richardson pinched the bridge of his nose. Sir, I'd prefer to focus on my duties. This is your duty now, James, Hayes said firmly. Like it or not, what happened to you has started something important. People are listening. Your conduct throughout has been exemplary. After ending the call, Richardson returned to the Williams family, apologizing for the interruption. More trouble? Mr. Williams asked perceptively. Not trouble exactly, Richardson replied. Just complications. The incident has drawn attention from Washington. Mrs. Williams looked up at him. You know, Colonel, when we first heard what happened, that you wouldn't be arriving with Damon, we were upset. But then we saw that video. She shook her head slowly. My father served in Vietnam. Came home to people spitting on him, calling him names. And he was a white man. What they did to you. It reminded me of the stories he told about how they treated the black soldiers back then. Mr. Williams nodded. Maybe some good can come from this. Maybe the next soldier won't face what you faced. Richardson considered their words carefully. Before my call, you mentioned your son wanted to be a teacher, to help children who needed extra support. Mrs. Williams smiled sadly. That was his dream. What would you think about creating a foundation in his name? Richardson suggested. Something focused on education for underprivileged youth. If the airline is offering resources, perhaps they could be directed there. For the first time that day, a genuine smile crossed Mrs. Williams' face. Damon would have loved that. 2 weeks later, Colonel Richardson sat in an uncomfortable chair in a sterile conference room at the airline's headquarters. Across from him sat Thomas Burke, the airport station manager. Jeffrey Phillips, the CEO, and their legal counsel. Also present was Major General Hayes, who had insisted on accompanying Richardson. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Colonel, Phillips began. We wanted to discuss the results of our internal investigation and the actions we're taking. Richardson nodded but remained silent, waiting. Our investigation found clear evidence of discriminatory treatment, Phillips continued, glancing occasionally at prepared notes. The gate agent and supervisor involved have been terminated. Their actions violated not only our company policies but potentially federal law regarding discrimination. Burke shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We've also implemented mandatory retraining for all customer-facing staff, with specific modules on military protocols and anti-bias training. That's a start, General Hayes said, his voice carrying the weight of his rank. But this incident has revealed systemic issues that go beyond 2 employees. Phillips nodded quickly. We agree, General. That's why we're establishing new company-wide policies specifically addressing military escorts. No military personnel escorting fallen soldiers will ever be questioned or delayed again. Richardson finally spoke. Mr. Phillips, training and policies are important. But what happened that day wasn't just about me being a military escort. It was about how your employees saw a black man in uniform and made assumptions. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The executives exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the directness of Richardson's statement. You're right, Phillips finally admitted, and that's why our new training goes beyond military protocols. We're implementing comprehensive anti-bias training for every employee, from baggage handlers to executives. Richardson leaned forward slightly. I've been thinking about what happened, about Specialist Williams, about his family. They're creating a foundation in his name to help underprivileged students pursue education. Phillips nodded eagerly. Yes, we've been in discussions with them about a corporate contribution. Good, Richardson said. But I'd like to suggest something more. The students who benefit from that foundation will need mentors, guides, people who believe in them. Your company has employees across the country, many with valuable skills and experience. You're suggesting a volunteer program? Phillips asked. I'm suggesting a commitment, Richardson corrected. Not just money, but time and genuine effort. Show those kids that what happened to me isn't the norm, that we can do better. For the first time in the meeting, Phillips seemed genuinely thoughtful rather than defensive. That's actually an excellent idea, Colonel. We could establish a formal mentorship program in conjunction with the foundation. General Hayes smiled slightly, clearly approving of Richardson's approach. As the meeting concluded and they prepared to leave, the airline's legal counsel approached Richardson privately. Colonel, we've prepared a settlement offer for you, she said quietly, offering a folder. The company acknowledges the distress and humiliation you experienced. Richardson looked at the folder but didn't take it. I'm not interested in personal compensation. The lawyer blinked in surprise. Sir, this is a substantial offer. I'm sure it is, Richardson replied. But this was never about money for me. Direct those funds to the Williams Foundation instead. Later that evening, Richardson sat in his hotel room, watching the news coverage of the congressional hearing that had taken place earlier that day. He hadn't been called to testify yet, but the incident was being cited repeatedly as evidence of ongoing discrimination. His phone rang. It was his wife. James, are you watching this? She asked when he answered. Yes, he replied, muting the television. It's strange seeing something so personal become so public. How did the meeting go with the airline? Richardson sighed. About as expected. They're doing damage control, but I think some good might come of it. They seem genuinely committed to the Williams Foundation. That's something, at least, his wife said. The Williams family called me today. Mrs. Williams wanted to invite us to the foundation launch next month. She said you're the guest of honor. Richardson felt a complex mix of emotions. He hadn't sought any of this attention, hadn't wanted to become the face of a movement or a cause. He'd simply been doing his duty as he had for 20 years. I told her we'd be there, his wife continued. I hope that's okay. Of course, Richardson said softly. Specialist Williams deserves to be remembered. If this foundation can be his legacy, then I'm honored to support it. As he ended the call, Richardson reflected on how a single act of discrimination had set off a chain of events nobody could have predicted. The pain and humiliation of that moment at the airport gate hadn't disappeared, but perhaps it hadn't been in vain. Perhaps Specialist Williams's final mission had been more important than anyone could have imagined. 3 months after Specialist Williams' funeral, Colonel Richardson stood at a podium in the Pine Creek High School gymnasium. The space had been transformed with flowers, banners, and photographs of a smiling young soldier in uniform. Behind Richardson sat the Williams family, airline executives, military personnel, and community leaders. Before him, filling every available seat, were townspeople, press, and students from the local schools. Today, Richardson began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed room, we gather not just to remember Specialist Damon Williams, but to ensure his spirit lives on through action and education. Richardson glanced at the large banner hanging above the stage. The Damon Williams Educational Foundation, the all design featured a graduation cap and the military dog tags that had meant so much to Mrs. Williams. This foundation will provide scholarships and mentoring to students who might otherwise not have the opportunity to pursue higher education, Richardson continued. It will embody the values Specialist Williams lived by: service, dedication, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to fulfill their potential. In the front row, Mrs. Williams dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Her husband sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his expression a mixture of grief and pride. What began as a tragedy has grown into something powerful, Richardson said. Sometimes difficult moments shine a light on problems we've been unwilling to face. They force us to look at ourselves, our institutions, and our biases. And if we're brave enough, they can lead to meaningful change. Richardson deliberately avoided looking at the airline executives seated on the stage. In the months since the incident, they had contributed $5 million to establish the foundation, created a military escort protocol that was being adopted industry-wide, and implemented the mentorship program Richardson had suggested. These were positive steps, but Richardson knew they had come only after public pressure and the threat of lawsuits. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the first 10 scholarship recipients have been selected, Richardson continued, gesturing to a group of high school seniors seated together near the front. These outstanding young people will receive full scholarships to the colleges of their choice, along with mentorship from professionals in their chosen fields. Applause filled the gymnasium. Richardson stepped away from the podium as Mr. Williams rose to speak. As Richardson took his seat, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He discreetly checked the message. It was from General Hayes. Turn on CNN when you can. They're covering the congressional hearing. Big developments. Richardson put his phone away, focusing his attention on Mr. Williams, who was now speaking about his son's dreams of becoming a teacher. The foundation announcement was more important than whatever was happening in Washington. After the ceremony, Richardson mingled with the scholarship recipients and their families. The joy and gratitude on their faces reminded him of why he had agreed to serve on the foundation's board, despite his initially reluctance to remain in the public eye. A young woman approached him, extending her hand. Colonel Richardson? I'm Lisa Chen from the Pine Creek Observer. Could I get a quick comment about today's launch? Richardson nodded. The foundation represents the best kind of response to adversity, creating opportunity for others. These scholarships honor Specialist Williams' memory in the most fitting way possible. And what about the hearing in Washington? She asked. The new legislation they're calling the Williams Protocol? Richardson kept his expression neutral despite his surprise. I'm afraid I haven't been following the hearings closely today. My focus has been here. The reporter looked surprised. Oh, I thought you'd have heard. The committee just approved a bill requiring all airlines to implement standardized protocols for military escorts, with specific anti-discrimination provisions. They're calling it the Williams Protocol in honor of Specialist Williams. Richardson hadn't expected this development. That sounds like a positive step forward, he said carefully. If you'll excuse me, I should rejoin the Williams family. As the event wound down, Richardson found a quiet corner to call General Hayes. I just heard about the Williams Protocol, Richardson said when Hayes answered. Why didn't you tell me this was coming? Hayes chuckled. Because I knew you'd try to keep your name out of it. But this is bigger than one incident now, James. This is about making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. Richardson sighed. Sir, with respect, I never wanted to be the face of this issue. Sometimes we don't choose our battles, James. They choose us. Hayes paused. There's something else you should know. The 2 airline employees who were fired, the gate agent and supervisor, they've been asking to meet with you. Richardson's brow furrowed. Meet with me? Why? Apparently they've been through some kind of personal reckoning. The whole thing went viral, their names got out, they lost their jobs. It's been rough for them, but from what I understand they've been doing some serious soul-searching. Richardson was silent for a moment. What do they want from me? To apologize, I think. Face to face. No cameras, no publicity. Just them and you. I'll think about it, Richardson said, not committing either way. After ending the call, Richardson rejoined the Williams family as they prepared to leave. Mrs. Williams hugged him tightly. Colonel, we can never thank you enough, she said, not just for bringing Damon home, but for everything you've done since. Your son's legacy will live on through these students, Richardson replied. That's the greatest honor we can give him. 1 week later, Richardson sat in a small conference room at his base. Across from him were two people he recognized immediately from that day at the airport: the gate agent, Robert Collins, and the supervisor, Diane Lawson. Both looked nervous, Lawson repeatedly adjusting her glasses while Collins kept clasping and unclasping his hands. Richardson had agreed to the meeting after considerable thought. He wasn't seeking apologies or closure for himself, but he believed in second chances and the possibility of genuine change. Thank you for meeting with us, Colonel Richardson, Lawson began, her voice slightly shaky. We know nothing we say can undo what happened that day. Collins nodded, unable to meet Richardson's eyes. We were wrong, completely wrong, and I've had to face some hard truths about myself since then. Richardson remained silent, letting them speak. I've been asking myself why I didn't believe your documentation was valid, Collins continued, why I immediately assumed there was a problem. And the honest answer, he finally looked directly at Richardson, is that I saw a black man in uniform and made assumptions I never would have made about a white officer. Lawson removed her glasses, wiping tears. I should have overruled him. I should have checked your documents properly. Instead, I backed him up without question. We failed you, and we failed Specialist Williams and his family. Richardson studied them both. Their remorse seemed genuine, not just regret for being caught or losing their jobs, but a deeper recognition of their actions. I appreciate your honesty, Richardson finally said. It's rare for people to examine their biases so directly. We've both been doing a lot of learning, Lawson said. Taking courses on unconscious bias, joining discussion groups. I'm working with a community center now, helping people prepare for job interviews. Collins nodded. And I've been volunteering with a veterans group, trying to understand better what military families go through. Richardson leaned forward slightly. What do you hope to gain from this meeting? The two exchanged glances before Collins spoke. Not forgiveness. We haven't earned that, and definitely not our jobs back. He hesitated. I guess we wanted you to know that what happened that day changed us, made us confront things about ourselves we didn't want to see. And we wanted to ask, Lawson added, if there's any way we could contribute to the Williams Foundation, not with money but with time, with effort. Richardson hadn't expected this request. You want to volunteer with the foundation? Only if it wouldn't be inappropriate, Lawson said quickly. We understand if that's asking too much. Richardson considered the request carefully. The foundation was about creating positive change, about turning painful experiences into opportunities for growth. Wasn't that exactly what these two people were trying to do? I can't make that decision alone, Richardson said finally. The Williams family has the final say on foundation matters, but I can bring your request to the board. Relief washed over both their faces. Thank you, Colonel, Collins said. That's more than we had any right to expect. As the meeting concluded and Richardson prepared to leave, Lawson spoke once more. Colonel Richardson, can I ask you something? How did you stay so composed that day? If I had been treated the way we treated you, I would have lost my temper. Richardson paused at the door. 20 years in uniform teaches you discipline. But more than that, I knew eyes were always on me. As a black officer, I learned early that I couldn't afford to show anger even when justified. Right or wrong, that's the reality I've lived with. The simple truth of his statement hung in the air as he left them to consider his words. 6 months later, Colonel Richardson stood in the back of a classroom at Pine Creek High School, watching as Robert Collins spoke to a group of students about unconscious bias and its real-world impacts. The former gate agent had become an effective speaker, using his own experience as a cautionary tale. After the class, Richardson approached Collins. That was well done. The students were engaged. Collins nodded, still showing hints of the shame he carried. It's the least I can do. The foundation giving me this chance, it means everything. The Williams family believes in second chances, Richardson replied. So do I. As they walked out of the classroom, Richardson reflected on the long, unexpected journey that had begun with that painful moment at the airport gate. What had started as discrimination had transformed into education. What had been humiliation had become a catalyst for change. Outside, the sign for the Williams Learning Center gleamed in the afternoon sun. Within its walls, students received tutoring, mentorship, and support. Diane Lawson ran the administrative office now, while Collins handled community outreach. The airline's corporate mentorship program brought in professionals from across the country to work with students, and at the center of it all was the memory of a young soldier who had dreamed of becoming a teacher. Specialist Damon Williams had come home one final time, but his legacy would continue for generations to come. Richardson gazed at the building, thinking of the strange, painful path that had led here. Sometimes, he reflected, it takes our darkest moments to show us the way toward light.